Hey guys, so I'm going to be talking about the core here in this PowerPoint, and I'm going to touch a little bit on some of the different training aspects of it. All right, so what is the core? Okay, so the book defines it as the lumbopelvic hip complex, which is kind of a mouthful in itself. The core is essentially everything pretty much below my chest down to my mid-thigh and all the way around. People often get core confused with abs, and they are a little different. I would say abs is a component of your core, but your core is not just abs. Because abs, everyone thinks about is that six-pack, when there's more to it than just that. Okay, so the lumbopelvic hip complex, LPHC, however I break it down. So it's your lumbar spine, your pelvic girdle, okay, or your hips, your abdomen, and then your hip joint, and everything that plays a factor with that. And there's over 30 muscles that comprise all of this. So core musculature is divided into three stabilizing categories. The first is we have your local stabilization system, and then your global stabilization system, and then your movement system. So they all kind of correlate. Obviously, the more important ones could be your movement system. And if you look at the chart there on the right, the local stabilizing system is just pretty much just a lot of really focused stabilizers. And they're usually pretty deep for the most part. And then the global stabilizing system is more kind of broad muscles, if you will. Some are deep, don't get me wrong, and some are more superficial. You also get other stabilizers such as your adductors, which, as you can see there, you have a good amount of adductors. Okay, or you can also consider that your groin. And then the last one's going to be your movement system, which is all some of the major muscles that help you move. Really, that locomotion component. So more about the local stabilizing system and all the muscles. For one, don't pay too much attention to the pictures here in the next few slides. They're just kind of examples, and they don't really depict everything that we're talking about here. Okay. So some of these local systems, so your transverse abdominis. So this is one of your core muscles. It's your abs, and if you will, but they kind of wrap around. Because they're transverse wise, so they're very horizontal. They wrap around your core and provide a lot of stability in that way. Very, very easy to train. Kind of keeps your core tight, if you will. And then there's your internal obliques, which are oblique muscles. Both of these muscles are again not shown in this picture, so don't use that completely as a diagram to base it off of. Help you do like good amount of rotation and counter rotation movements. Your lumbar multifundus is actually shown in this, and that is this yellow depicted. Is a bit more smaller muscles that act on your spine. You have your pelvic floor muscles, okay, which are deep kind of here, not depicted. They're kind of small, flat, mainly have to do with a lot of issues related to like your bowels and bladder and stuff like that. And then your diaphragm, okay, which sits under your lungs, can help you breathe, if you will. So this is your local stabilizing system. Your global stabilizing system is your quadratus lumborum, which is oddly enough depicted in this picture. Okay, and then in the yellow is more of your transverse abdominis, which is again depicted in. Is actually depicted here, and that's in yellow. You have your psoas major, which is a very, very deep muscle that does do a good portion of hip flexion as well as trunk flexion. Then you have your external obliques here, some portions of your internal obliques, your rectus abdominis, which is your six-pack, if you will, and then your adductor complex, okay, which is all those adductors. Adductor magnus, adductor minimus, gracilis, sartorius, and so forth. but doesn't know measure growing muscles. Okay, and then your movement system. So these are the muscles that help you, like, these are major muscles that help you do movement. For example, your hamstrings, your quads, your hip flexors, and your lats. All these are needed for you to either stay upright or to move. If you're going to walk or run, these are your main ones that are going to help you do that. And all between your local, global, and movement systems help you, they'll correlate to help you do more efficient movements. Obviously, like going back to the local system, this should be more of your primary ones you would train, and especially right off the bat, as well as your global. I mean, you're not going to isolate one versus the other, but you definitely want to get your local and your global first before you move to the movement systems. And training these two systems here really, really increases the efficiency of your movement system. Okay, so many people have a strong movement system but weak stabilizing muscles. Very, very true. Increasing force through the lumbo-pelvic hip complex, and a result of this can cause usually a lot of back pain and injury as a result, because you rely on these big muscles, but you don't train all these other stabilizing muscles. And so it's just low efficiency, and movements aren't as solid, and I don't want to use efficient too much. Solid and there's more room for error and injury as a result, I guess is the best way to say it. Strengthening the stabilizers, hence the stabilizing system, before the musculars that moves the spine, your movement system, really helps with a lot of things. Usually if you increase your core strength and stability, everything else is more efficient. You can run faster, jump higher. Everything is easier. If you were talking about like maxes, your squat increases, your bench increases, everything just by training your core. Because everything in your core has to contract first before your other muscles do. Usually there's this contraction of more proximal to distal. For example, my shoulder has to stabilize the joint before my arm moves. It's usually really, you don't notice it as much or don't notice it at all, but a lot of the muscles usually deep in there have to contract, which you don't usually see happen for that movement to occur. I'm saying same thing. Your core usually has to contract at some point before your shoulder does, before your arm can move. Okay. Rationale. So decreasing activation of the stabilizing mechanism in individuals with chronic low back pain. Performing traditional abdominal exercises without proper internal pelvic stabilization increases the pressure on the discs and compressive forces on the spine. And as well, performing traditional low back hyperextension exercises without proper internal pelvic stabilization increases pressure on the discs to dangerous levels. A lot of the forces that we play, especially on our spine, if we're not properly, I don't say properly trained, but prepared for some of these activities, and not really talking about more, I'm not really talking about a warm-up, but more of if your core can't maintain these forces, it's going to fail. And a lot of times when you pick up something, it's usually, our technique is usually pretty crap. Like every time I pick my baby girl off the ground, I'm not usually using the best technique for it because she's pretty light. She's like 15 pounds. Should I? Yes. But off the time I forget or I just don't care, which happens to a lot of people. But some of those forces, especially as I just bend over and I use mainly my back for that extension purposes, if my back's not strong enough to do it, it's going to fail at some point. And that's usually some issue with the intervertebral discs that can bulge and cause what people often say is, oh, I have a pinched nerve. It can cause a lot of injuries like that. So making sure our core can stabilize, especially some of those deep stabilizing muscles, is really, really important for any real motion to occur first. Solutions for stabilization. Okay, so there's two methods. There's the draw-in maneuver, and then there's bracing. So the draw-in maneuver, so you're pulling in the region just below the navel towards the spine. Okay, so this activates the local stabilizing system. The bracing is a co-contraction of the rectus abdominis, internal obliques, and quadratus lumborum. So this focuses on the global trunk stability, not segmental vertebral stability. So I put in this module a video that's really well done on the differences between the draw-in and the bracing. Okay, they're both important. It's easier to start off with a draw-in because you don't really require a lot of stuff. It's just, all right, pretty much suck it in. It's almost like a vacuum, if you will. The bracing is my go-to for a lot of movements in particular, just because you have to activate, co-contract a lot of different muscles in your core for it. But for some people, especially early on, you may need the practice with the drawing in before you move on to the bracing. Solutions for stabilization: maintaining cervical spine in a neutral position during core training. It will improve posture, muscle balance, and stabilization. That cervical spine, as well as just the neutral spine, is easy to do. Easy to get feedback from, but kind of hard to execute for some people. An easy way to maintain that cervical spine in neutral for any activity is have feedback from someone else or something. One way to do it, especially during like squats, for example, is you get a broomstick or some kind of dowel or whatever it is, and you hold it against your back. Let's see if I can do a quick dirty version right here. So I happen to have a pipe. Don't ask why I have too much pipe. So one thing you do is you just put it against your back. Okay. So one hand's going to hold it against my low back. Another hand's going to hold it against my head. I'm going to try and keep as much as my spine in contact with the pipe at all times as I squat. Okay. So that can help give you feedback that way you're not like looking up or looking down during a squat, especially if you don't have someone to give you that feedback. But if you are just simply doing a core workout with someone else, you can have them give you feedback, or you can just record yourself when you do said exercises, and that can help you get that feedback going by looking back at it. So for every real exercise, you should really keep your cervical spine in neutral. To really help kind of make sure your core is more properly engaged. Just because I touched on squats a little bit, that is also including squats. A lot of the bad techniques that people used to teach in the past, I mean, they taught me, my high school coach, was to stay more upright, look up at the ceiling, or straight ahead. That's usually not the best thing in the world, is to look up, because now I'm extending my cervical spine, and I can also extend my thoracic and lumbar as a result, doing that, which is not really good for my core in general. Requirements for core training. Okay, so core stabilization system is primary slow twitch. I mean, there's usually a pretty good mix in it. Some muscles need substantial contraction, 6 to 20 seconds, to enhance static and dynamic stabilization of that complex. So a lot of times holds is going to be very, very beneficial, especially right off the bat. That's going to be your planks and side planks are like the main ones. You could do some bridges as well and do like the holds. But a lot of those can be very, very beneficial for your core muscles. Just because a lot of your core muscles do a lot of posture. And so a lot of time you can't sit up straight for long periods of time. Mainly because we get tired and we tend to slouch. In class, everyone's like slouching like this as they kind of try not to fall asleep during anyone's class. But mainly you get really tired because you don't have those muscles to support yourself for those long periods of time. So training them for like holds, for example, can help you maintain your posture for longer periods. Designing an integrated program. Okay, so your progression, easy to hard, simple to complex, known and unknown variables, stable to unstable, is going to help you really kind of progress whatever it is. And what it is everyone's going to be a little different. Start them off on something that's maybe a little bit easier and see how they are versus harder. Some things that are more complex, a lot of people maybe can't do it because they don't have either the core or the balance to do it. What they can do, what they can't do is another big thing. It's more the known unknown. And then stable versus unstable. Okay. And some of those goes hand in hand with like easy to hard. For example, a plank. Okay. Maybe some people can't do a plank for a number of reasons. So let's say they can't do it because they don't have the shoulder stability. Okay. Or they don't have the core to engage to hold that plank even for like 10 seconds. So then you would start them off maybe on their knees and elbows. Okay. Or even easier, have them do a plank on a wall. Okay. Or against a table or whatever it is. So instead of doing it on the ground, you have to move them to a table. Okay. You're going to hold a plank just like this. Okay. Make sure their body's straight for the most part. And see if they can do that for that 20, 30 seconds. Okay. And if they can only get like 15, maybe 20, and they're starting to like shake and wobble, and it's really hard for them, all right, well, there's a good starting point for them. Okay? Or even have them against the wall. Okay. Something like this. This is really, really early on. Okay. Have them slowly progress maybe from the wall to a table, then to the ground, but they're on their knees. And then you can have them fully get their knees off and do like a full proper plank. That's more easy to hard. You can also, once they get to the full plank, you can add the unstable surfaces. You can put a ball under their feet, Dynadiscs, whatever to make it unstable. And then the number of things really just increases. I mean, really the sky's the limit. And the systematic, okay, you want to start with your stabilization exercises first, and then go to your strength and power. Planes of motion, okay, you want to work all of these different planes, sagittal, frontal, and transverse, if possible. Everyone tends to work really just sagittal. For example, your sit-ups, your front planks are your main ones that work your sagittal plane. Frontal plane is going to be your side planks, for example, or side crunches or whatever it is. And transverse is going to be your rotation. So you already use either bands or cables or whatever it is to usually achieve this. Tap resistance, stability ball, cables, tubing, medicine ball, power ball, dumbbells, body weights, whatever it is. Okay. Usually with core, you have to keep it usually pretty interesting because it can get really, really boring. But it's also really good to do it with someone else. Usually run the same level as them to kind of push them a little bit. So 3 levels that we'll talk about. Again, stabilization, strength, and power. Okay, so the stabilization. Okay, exercises involve little motion through the lumbopelvic hip complex, designed to improve the functional capability of the deep stabilizing muscles. For example, like here's the plank. Really, really simple for the most part. Make sure that they're straight across their body, especially including their cervical spine. Common mistakes are people will stick their butt up too high, they'll fall too low, they'll get a rounding at the back. Their shoulders will kind of retract too far. So you want to maintain a good, strong plank, which can get really hard. You want to contract your abs, if you will, your rectus abdominis, and really hold the contraction of your glutes. So contract your glutes really, really hard. Okay. There's also marching, and these 4 exercises listed here, examples, are in your book, in the chapter. Marching is a great one to do, especially right off the bat, and it can get really, really hard, especially if you do a posterior tilt of your hips. And that's more just rotating your hips backwards. So if your example is if you were to lay on the ground on your back with your knees bent, pushing your low back into the ground to get rid of that little arch, an example of a posterior tilt. Some people get it really easy. Some people it takes a little bit of time for them to kind of learn. But just doing some marches can get very, very tiring. And marching is just on your back with your knees bent. If you can get that posterior tilt, even better. And you're just lifting one leg off the ground, maybe like 4 to 6 inches, and then put it back down to your next one. That's all it is. And it can get really tiring, especially for a lot of individuals. It's a good starting exercise. This is one of the first exercises they make someone after back surgery do. Usually within like 2 or 3 days. Okay, that's one of the first exercises. It's very minimal. It works a good amount of those deep core muscles, especially your stabilizing ones. Two-legged bridge. That's just a bridge where you're on your back and knees bent, and then you lift your hips off the ground using your glutes. And you can do holds, you rep it out, however you want to do that, keep it interesting. Prone Cobra, you're on your stomach, and more doing like an extension exercise. And the plank as you see listed here. So again, these are your stabilizing muscles, or exercises, excuse me. Then your strength. Okay, so this could be more of your more traditional exercises you do for core. You always want to start with the stabilization ones for sure. So these involve more dynamic, eccentric and concentric movements through full ranges of motion. Okay, the key thing is full range of motion. Okay, so you have ball crunches, back extensions, reverse crunches, cable rotations. Okay, as the picture shows here of the cable. Okay, making sure that all these is done with control. Okay, so when you do that crunch, making sure you're going up and down with some kind of control, normal tempo. Don't just kind of go up really quick and just fall back down. Okay, you need that eccentric motion, and you need to go through that full range of motion as well. Okay, now we got the power exercises. Okay, so these are more designed to improve the rate of force production of the core muscles. This is going to be more of your explosive movements. So rotation chest press, medicine ball, overhead throw, front medicine ball, oblique throw, the soccer throw. Obviously, most of these are done with some kind of weighted ball. And you're doing some kind of explosive force. Okay. And all these examples are straight out of your book, too. And they give a little bit more in depth on some of the exercises in there, so you can go to them. So implementing a core program. Okay, so phase 1 is going to be obviously stabilization. 2 through 4 is going to be more your core strength exercises, and phase 5 is going to be your power. You always want to start in phase 1 or your stabilization. It's always a really, really good kind of, I want to say core program with core exercises, but this is your basics, okay? Especially the marching and the plank, okay? And the bridge. I mean, they're all really, really good. But, and some people are going to find those stabilizing ones really, really difficult, okay? Some people, and then do those before you even progress to more of this like strength level stuff. A lot of people will be really caught up on the stabilization level stuff for a long time. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because that's where you are. Because a lot of people really lack that core efficiency. Okay. And then obviously the more advanced is going to be the phase 5. So in your program design, okay, depending on where you're at. So if you're in the stabilization kind of stage or phase 1, number of exercises, okay, 1 through 4. Usually 1 to 4 sets. Your reps is going to be 12 to 20. The tempos are usually pretty slow, and that's usually eccentric, concentric, and isometric. Okay, so going down, going up, and then the hold. okay, for the most part. And rest about 90 seconds in between sets. Especially if that person's very new, start them off maybe a little bit, so maybe number of exercises, maybe up to 4. Nothing wrong with that. Make sure their form doesn't suffer as a result. Once their form suffers, have them take a break, or they're done with that exercise. Some of the sets, you can increase the sets, maybe 8 sets, but I'm going to take the reps way down because they're just trying to get through something right now. The marching usually depends on if they can get that posterior tilt and how well they can do it under control. But some of these want to apply, like say if you're doing planks, all right, maybe I'm doing front planks, side planks, and what else I want to do? I'll do the bridges, why not? Okay, so 3 exercises, but the planks are usually holds. Okay, so I'm going to maybe start off with something that's new, maybe 15, 20-second holds on the planks, front and side. And then on the bridges, I want to have them rep it out a little bit. So I may have them do, all right, try and give me 20 reps on the bridges if you can. Okay, or until they start to kind of fatigue and their form kind of goes to shit. And then I'm like, all right, stop there. Take a little break, and then we'll start over. Okay. And then more of the movement or the strength. Excuse me. Same exercises, 0 to 4, usually for the number. Sets, 2 to 3. Your reps go down a little bit. Your tempos get a little faster. Okay, and you got about 6-second rest. And then the power ones, you don't have too many exercises. Again, your sets are pretty low. Same with your reps. Your tempo is usually pretty fast. But you usually you have to have a good amount of stability and control with these. Okay, so you're not just going as fast as you can without any kind of side effects. You still have to do it through the full range of motion under control. And usually with all these, especially the power, you definitely want to do your core more towards the end. A result of this is, let's say your exercise for the day is squats. And given if you're more advanced up there doing, if you're in like phase 5, for example, in core, your squats are pretty extreme. Maybe you're doing 85% of your max for, I don't know, 10 reps with multiple sets. You would want to do, for example, your core after your squats because you don't want to exhaust your core before you do a more complex movement. That's going to, affect like your squats, for example. And you don't want your core to fail and result in injury. All right, so summary. So core musculature helps protect the spine. Okay, core is good. You should usually do core every day or every time you do some kind of activity or training. Core training programs have to be systematically progressive, activity or goal specific, integrated, and hopefully increasingly challenging. Proper core training programs follow the same systematic progression, stabilization, strength, and power.